going to try this one more time. Stephen.
Thank you. Hi, just to recap, we're here to talk about the Malware Hash Registry. I'm Steve Gill. I work for Team Cymru. Have any of you heard of the Malware Hash Registry yet? Raise your hand. Has anybody heard of it? Okay, we got a few hands. Yeah, we made this announcement on Nanog, and a few folks asked us to come by and just recap a little bit about what it was about, talk about it, and bring it up on a Nanog presentation. So we decided, sure, why not? So if you haven't heard of us, can I go back with? If you haven't heard of us, Team Cymru, the name is Cymru, pronounced Cymru, stands for, it's Welsh for Wales. We are a group of technologists and scientists interested in making the internet more secure. So we're going to take the elevator ride a little bit up the application, or up the OSI model to the application layer, and we're going to talk more at the packet level, or more at the bits and bytes that are within those packets, rather than the protocol level. BGP is what we've heard a lot about today. But our mission is essentially the who and the why, and that is who is behind nefarious activity on the internet, why are they doing these bad things, and how can we keep the internet more secure, keep these bad guys away. So while others of us are focusing on the protocols, making them more stable, Team Cymru is here focusing on the people that are using the internet and keeping them away. So our agenda. First, we'll talk about the purpose of the Malware Hash Registry, how to access it, how to use it, what are some of the usages and applications you can employ it with, and we'll give you some brief statistics on what we've seen in terms of usage so far, and of course looking more towards the future and how we see it possibly being used. Again, just a quick recap. Jeopardy question, who is Team Cymru? There will be a pop quiz afterwards, so take your pens and papers out if you haven't heard of us. So it began as a hobby back in 1998, and we incorporated in 2004. We actually were a part of a research branch of Cisco, and we sort of forked off of that after a short period of time. And again, we're a group of researchers interested in making the internet more secure. So we work with many ISPs. A lot of you are here today. If we don't work with you yet and you're here and you haven't heard of us, please come and talk to me afterwards. We'd love to partner with more and more ISPs worldwide. We work with over 1,000 ISPs, CERTs, government institutions, etc., possibly you. We also have a group of investigators that are working for us now. We've hired Steve Santarelli from ex-Scotland Yard, people from Dutch NHTCC, Polish police, Secret Service, etc. So we have a good mix of people that have a law enforcement background to help us on the investigative side. So again, our mission is the who and the why. Well, how does the Malware Hash Registry and what is it? How does that come into play with what we do? First off, this is my view of the internet. Hopefully every one of you can see these slides on the webcast and everywhere else. It's a piece of Swiss cheese. Now, why is that significant? Well, the way I look at it is this, and maybe for you IPv6 naysayers, maybe this is an IPv4 world, right? We have a piece of Swiss cheese. Well, there's a lot of holes in that cheese, right? There's a lot of exploits available. There's a lot of potential vulnerabilities. There's a lot of problems. So these holes are each, different issues that you may encounter on the internet. The way I look at it is, well, it still works. It's still pretty flavorful, right? It's still, I like Swiss cheese. I don't know about you. Maybe pick your favorite flavor. But it still works. And, things aren't broken. Things work great. Well, come malware, enter the miscreant world, and that piece of Swiss cheese turns a little bit more rotten. Now we have these exploits, we have these potential vulnerabilities, but along comes malware, along comes a miscreant, and he makes it even worse. So the problem's gotten significantly worse to the point where it's not even, do we even want to use this anymore? This isn't flavorful. This isn't useful to me anymore. So I guess you could think of this as, I don't know, perhaps when IPv6 comes along. We talked a lot about that today, right? So is this what the internet's going to look like? I don't know. Hopefully not. So with taking the malware perspective, what we've seen is, in terms of number of viruses and malware on the internet, we've seen our sample rates skyrocketing. On average, we see one new virus every 2 seconds. So if you have a calculator out, you can punch up in 30 minutes, however long my talk will take, how many new viruses have been released. That's going to be your pretty dead-on statistic. Now, guess what? That's just what we've seen. We don't see everything. And I can't tell you, I have no idea how much we're not seeing. But I think we see a fair bit. The question is, what's the real rate out there? It's pretty significant, right? What are some of the vectors that we're talking about? Of course, there's people releasing that malware, vectors in terms of malware that goes after your mobile devices. We just saw a news article come out recently where malware can actually extract financial details from your phones. Drive-by downloads, lots and lots of those these days, right? Compromised web servers, miscreants are compromising them, installing exploits, and the unsuspecting user goes to a well-known web server, and lo and behold, if he's vulnerable, he's exploited. There's the file infectors, your typical thumb drives happening more and more. Started very early in Asia-Pac, and it's reaching its critical mass in those areas, but much more in the U.S. these days as well. USB drives, et cetera, et cetera. So what's the purpose of the Malware Hash Registry? That's just a fancy way of saying we have a way of incorporating a very simple yet somewhat effective hashing mechanism to take a signature set of all the malware that we've seen and make that available in a usable format to you. So outside of your typical antivirus product, all we're simply doing is taking a signature of each of the files that we've seen, putting that in a database, and allowing you to query it. So that's the MD5 or the SHA-1. Pick your flavor. It's all the known malware that we've seen, and of course the antivirus detection rate that we've seen associated with that. Well, we're not just showing you the fact that it's shown in our database, but we're also presenting you with a synopsis or a brief snapshot in terms of how bad or how well detected, that malware may be. If it's something new, perhaps it's not well detected at all. Perhaps 3 out of 35 AV vendors can detect that. So we're presenting you with the statistics as to how many AV vendors are detecting it. If you're familiar with our Whois server, it's very similar in concept to that, where you can punch in an IP address and it will return your BGP autonomous system number or the origin ASN that is routing that prefix. So in the same way, you can query our Whois server with this information. You can give it a SHA-1 or MD5 hash, and it gives you back the results. It's not meant to do away with AV by any means. In fact, you might say, well, what about the polymorphic viruses, the ones that always change their hash, or viruses that have different runtime characteristics? Are you able to address that? No, we're not. We're not trying to do that. We're trying to complement AV. So this is meant to run alongside of that. This is meant to catch the malware that doesn't change. So we're maintaining a hash signature set of I think it's about 1 gigabyte in size. So you can quickly determine that wouldn't be very effective in an AV product if you had to synchronize a 1 gig antivirus signature file all the time, right? That's pretty huge. So what we're doing is storing that information in the cloud, and simply all you have to do is issue a DNS query or Whois query, and you can get the results. So again, we're trying to let AV continue to do what it's doing best, right? It can do the behavioral analysis, it can do the polymorphic detection, all that great and fancy stuff, and everything else, things that are more run-of-the-mill, things that we've seen before. Perhaps we can rely on the MHR or the Malware Hash Registry to give us the statistics. And last but not least, this is free for non-commercial use. Some of the access methods, we talked about Whois, but it's also available via Netcat if you want to issue a query for multiple hashes at a time, hundreds or thousands even. It's not a problem. It will give you back the results similar to Whois. It's not really a protocol, right? You just pipe data to a socket and get some results back. So it's very much similar to our bulk Whois. Also DNS, you can issue a single DNS query and it'll come back give you back a text record with the results for that hash, whether or not it's in a database. Some other thoughts that we've considered are something like an instant messaging utility, where you can just aim or pick your favorite instant message flavor, and you can message the bot and it'll come back with the statistics or the results for you. Also a web-based application which would be pretty much something simple where you can just proxy a query. And your ideas here. If you have something that's not yet supported, give us a holler and we'll talk about it. Or if you want to do it yourself, link to your webpage and add it there. So this is just a very, very slimmed down version of the architecture. Right on the left we have our smiley faces, red smiley faces. I had about 5 minutes to put this together, so these are actually meant to be viruses. The viruses, they should probably be sad faces, I guess, with an X in them or something. They enter the malware database through various means. So we have collectors across the globe, something I haven't talked about yet, but we have well over 10, 20 different types of collectors. So we can collect malware off the wire. We go out and fetch it off the internet, off of known bad places. We monitor botnets, so we retrieve malware that way. And lots of different mechanisms whereby malware can enter our database. We also share malware with in a certain number of circumstances where we have certain private exchanges going. So once it enters the database, then what do we do with it? We run it through a parallelization process where it actually analyzes the malware and cross-references it with 35 antivirus vendors in a matter of a few seconds. And those results then get tabulated, summarized, and anything that comes out the end that does have a positive AV result as infected with something, then we stuff that into the MHR. So the MHR is simply comprised of a list of hashes that we've known to be bad associated with that malware and the antivirus information associated with it. You would be coming from the cloud someplace, somewhere on the internet, issuing queries to the MHR. Now, hopefully you can see this in the back, but these are just some sample usage of the tool. With the whois in the Netcat mode, you can issue a single query with whois-h. The host name is hash.cymru.com. Hopefully I have a link later on in the slides if you want to reference it, or you can just go to cymru.com and find it there in the service details page. So you just issue the query whois-h hash.cymru.com and the big old SHA-1 there. And it comes back with two numbers. The numbers are Unix timestamp last seen, and the second one is a percentage of AV detection. So this is, in this case, 53% of our AV vendors used in the test detected this as malware. So it's known malware, essentially. The same thing can be done with Netcat. Issue a Netcat query to port 43, redirect the list of hashes that you're interested in, and redirect the output to some other file. And this is known as bulk mode. You'll get back a list of tabulated results with the hash on each line and the result after that. So in this case, we sent a query for, it looks like there's a little bug here, but the wrong timestamp is displayed, but for the query itself. But we issued a query for a certain number of hashes, and you see the results come back. Same type of system for DNS. Again, the output is exactly the same. You get a text record back. And if you don't really care about the results, you just want to know if it's in the database, you can do a short query for an A record. The A record comes back with a well-known localhost IP. Then you know it's in the database. So what are some potential applications for this? Well, who knows? It might be coming soon to a router vendor near you. How many of you would like to see that in a router? Scary? I don't know. Maybe at the end level. We talked a bit about IPv6 NAT and all that fun stuff. Well, maybe something like this could happen, right? A Bro appliance, if you're familiar with IDS utilities, a lot in the educational world, edu space, a lot of people love to use Bro. Bro is a really extensive tool, allows you to do some in-depth packet analysis, and it works quite well. So you might see that in a Bro appliance at some point. Your ideas here, we're open to suggestions. You could implement this on the mail server level, where you have files or mail messages coming in, and you extract the files or the attachments automatically, and you can do a cross query just like you would with a standard RBL, but it's an RBL for malware or for attachments rather than for IP addresses. Of course, you could use this for forensics, poor man's AV, of course, and the sky's the limit. We'll do a sneak peek of another tool that we are planning on releasing. It's actually already been developed, just hasn't been announced. It's a Windows version of the same thing, although what it'll do is it will list out all the processes that are running on your system, and then query the MHR to see if any of those processes match the database. So think of this like a AV product or something that you might put along with an AV product if you want to know if any of the running files or processes on your system have been associated with malware or been affiliated with malware in terms of the signature of the files. So we'll talk a little bit about why we think this is useful. First off, in terms of, well, why wouldn't we just use an AV product in general and we'll be done with it, right? We don't have to worry about that problem. We use AV. Sure, AV is great. How many of you use AV here on your desktops? Raise your hands. Okay, I see a few hands. How many of you have Macs? Think you don't need AV? I see a lot of Macs out there. All right, you don't need AV. That's true. There are far fewer viruses for the Macs than there are for Windows, but we don't know how long that'll be the case, right? It's not the fact that Macs are better. It's just the fact that miscreants haven't chosen to go after Macs yet because there aren't as many out there. Simple numbers game. The return on investment. So if they're going to go after the biggest market product out there, it's probably going to be Windows boxes. So we're safe for a little bit, but there is still a lot of malware that's released for Macs. Long story short, we collect approximately 30,000 unique malware samples per day. Using our current AV detection signatures, we see a detection rate of approximately 28%. You say, well, I use AV, I'm safe, right? Wrong. You're not safe. 28% on average detection rate across the board. 30 days later, probably gets as good as about 50%. Am I safe now? Not really, right? Half of the files that we see 30 days later after initial release are detected by AV. That's not really good. So we did receive some results from a private study when it was first released, and an individual noticed that with using AV and MHR together improved the detection rate of by approximately 50%. So if you have a 50% batting average plus 50% on top of that, that's nearly 100%, right? That's great. Sure, we can't expect to get 100% in all cases, but certainly it's a lot better than not using it at all. So we're always open to receiving contributions, of course, to the project, such as additional AV products. If you're from an AV vendor and you'd like to participate, please talk to me afterwards. We may have your AV engine covered, but we may not. If you want to submit malware samples, again, suggestions, moral support, we always take coffee, too. I love Dominican Republic coffee. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. In the first 5 days, we had over 750,000 queries, so it just gives you an idea of how the product was adopted in the early days. In 2009, we've had well over 10 million queries already, just the month of January. A Bro add-on was released the very first day. It's actually gives you the ability to automatically extract hashes from files that are traversing the network. I believe it does it from HTTP transactions, so from HTTP GETs, and automatically checks the MHR to see if any of the hashes match. So yeah, think of it as real-time HTTP monitoring. It's also a Linux tool that will probe, similar to the WinMHR. I guess you can think of it as Linux MHR. It'll probe all the active processes, list them out, and then query the MHR to see if there's any known matches. Some future add-ons we're considering at this point include a kernel driver to watch for new processes. So rather than statically running this on an irregular basis, what it could do is watch for processes that are released or that are initiated on a system, and then before allowing it to initiate, or passively allowing it to initiate, but query the MHR to see if it matches. Also, we're talking about monitoring sub-processes. So within processes in Windows, you have DLLs, and querying for those DLLs to see if any of those match as well. So we've seen a fair bit of malware using the simple DLL techniques for transferring. So just a quick FAQ. How do I interpret the output? Well, it's actually not that bad. We talked about it, right? It's really just two numbers, timestamp and detection rate. How do you collect malware? list is long and varied. So there are not a lot of ways that we don't collect malware, although we're always interested in finding more. Our real challenge, along with many other many AV vendors out there, we're not an AV vendor, but is a similar one in that there's so much malware out there today. It's so prevalent that you really have to pick your battles, and it's a scaling issue in terms of being able to process it all and analyze it all, and then issue the appropriate signatures for them. So. Another question, can I download your MHR database? Well, it's not publicly available, but if you'd like to talk to us in private about some type of data sharing agreement, we're happy to discuss details further. And we'll get this question a lot. Can I get a sample of this file? I need it really bad. Read the FAQ. So, which AV engines do we use? At this point, it's undisclosed. We don't list them out because we don't want to make this a miscreant scoreboard or a scorecard to see, well, if I write a virus and I release it, how many of the engines have been able to detect my file? Well, there's websites they can go and upload the files to if they really want to, but we're not going to make it available for that type of usage. So we don't want to become a scorecard. Therefore, the AV engines at this point are undisclosed. If you want to talk more about our malware database, we're happy to discuss later more details, how the architecture works. We actually don't do just AV scanning. That's just the tip of the iceberg. We're really interested in who's behind the malware and why are they doing it. So we do a lot more than that. We sandbox it. We run it through a internal system to detect what's the malware doing, where's it going on the internet. And then we have additional relationship building heuristics to detect similarities between malware samples and how they relate to one another. And in fact, based on those similarity characteristics, you can use those as clue finding techniques to determine, if you have sample A is linked to sample B, well, maybe sample B can give you some more details as to who's behind it. Should I stop using antivirus? Certainly not. If I haven't stressed this enough already, please don't stop using AV. That's not the point of the MHR. It's really meant to be used in conjunction with the tool. We update the MHR about once a day, so you're not going to get instant updates, but they may be, if a file has been released and we've scanned it through our system, you may see it as early as 24 hours from when we've seen it. If you have any issues, you're using it, you'd like to use it and you notice some false positives, so we're more than happy to take those. There's a URL where you can send in your false positive reports. We actually cross-reference the data with the NIST database, and we remove any potential false positives from there. So we use that as a whitelist, so to speak. So again, we talked about Team Cymru, who we are. A few other ways we might be able to help you includes things like tracking flows. We have a lot of feeds that might be of assistance, particularly as it pertains to malware analysis, such as botnets, compromised devices, etc. If you have any questions about your specific network or IPs they're in or prefixes, give me a holler afterwards. We also have the ability to try to help you track down who might be behind a given incident, particularly when we can work with law enforcement to make an impact on the problem. There's a copy of my business card. It's clear. Talk to me afterwards if you would like to see one. And that's it. I'm ready for questions.
Hi, Bastian here. You said the average hit rate of AVs was 28%?
Yep.
And in the initial example, you had a hash with 56%?
53, yep.
So that's for the individual...
That's the individual hash, right, exactly right.
But you don't add anything of your own findings, you just take the results from the individual AV engines?
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
Wes Hardiker, Sparta. Over here.
Hi.
Looks like great stuff.
Thank you.
One quick question, though. You're distributing your results by Whois and DNS. Is there any plans to sign your DNS set data with DNSSEC? Because that would seem like a good, even if it was an isolated key, that would be one thing that people would want to check the data to make sure it was valid.
That's in the next talk.
I realize
I'm
that
just
there's
kidding.
it's a segue, but the question's still there.
Appreciate it. We haven't had any specific plans on DNSSEC yet. I appreciate the point. And in terms of hashes, is it more of a concern in terms of getting back positive results for something where theoretically somebody could block a file if the results have been spoofed, in other words?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the attack case would be somebody that was distributing a virus that, in my opinion, is probably fairly targeted. You're trying to aim for one particular customer, and you also want to swamp their DNS so that they wouldn't notice they were affected by a virus. I think it's probably more of a corner case than a lot of the rest of the other cases that you might hit. Nonetheless, anytime I'm checking signatures, be it SSH fingerprints or hashes for malware, that becomes critical data to me, which for me means I like it protected.
Right. So for now, the initial way of getting around that would be using TCP, using like a whois query. But if you wanted to stick to DNS, there's a few other options, such as you could sync the data down privately and not have to query over the internet, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, I appreciate the point, and definitely put that in the list of things to do. Any more questions? All right, thank you.